Hi again, everyone. So this is Surya, and I'm from Document 360, and I'm also one of the co-organizers for this webinar. Thank you for joining the session today. We are just as excited as you are. So our guest today is Selvaraaju Murugesan. He's the head of data science at 𝐭𝐚𝐤𝐸, a leading enterprise and SaaS company. He received his master's from La Trobe University, Australia in 2008, and he did his PhD degree in computational mathematics from La Trobe University. His interests are in the area of documentation, technical writing, and data analytics. So for today's session, the key takeaways would be exploring the basics of large language models and prompt engineering. And we also look forward to understand the structure of prompts and applying for business use cases and best practices. So after this presentation, there will be a QA session. So I would request you to key in your questions on the Q&A platform here so that our team can collate and hand over them. Thank you. So Selva, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Surya. Thank you everyone for joining us for yet another webinar from Document 360, and this is the first one we are doing, and we're so excited about what you're going to learn in terms of prompt engineering. So let's dive into what we have for store for this webinar. We'll start off with giving an overview about prompt engineering basis, and then we'll focus on what are the generic prompts that a technical writer can use on a day-to-day activities, and then we'll move on to some prompts for specific business use cases. So let's dive in. So in terms of some of the trends that's happening across the globe in terms of how people how some of your customers find information is actually dramatically changing. So if you look at the old paradigm where people key in some search keywords in a search engine and land on your documentation site, has dramatically changed thanks to ChatGPT and Bard. So right now they are the new kind of the tools where people go to for finding the information. So if you look at the way these two tools actually revolutionized the way we actually look for information is transformational. People want accurate answers in short span of time. So that is the core crux of how these two technologies are actually shifting in terms of paradigm, in terms of finding information, and more importantly, using that information. The aspect of finding out what we want from a chat system, which is powered by a large language model for ChatGPT and Bard, is called prompt engineering. In simple words, it's all tactics that we use in terms of words to get what we need from those chat systems. One of the fundamental things you need to understand from the prompt engineering is the objectives of your prompts are very important. Now, without which you can't have a clarity in terms of asking the system what it needs to do. So, so the basic definition of a prompt is a prompt contains information such as an instruction or a question that you pass it to this large language model. And you also need to include some details around what is the context, what is the input to that prompt, to the large language model. And you can also give some examples and ask the large language model to follow a set of patterns. So that's what usually a prompt actually contains. So let's delve into what are the elements of a prompt. So there are four basic elements in a prompt, which if you want to dissect it, the first most important thing in a prompt is instructions. So those are the verbs that we actually use to take some action on. So these are basically, these instructions are very much focused on the task, what the ChatGPT like system have to do. Okay, so these instructions could be verbs such as suggest, provide, give me a list of things and things like that. Usually it starts with the verbs. Then let's come to the another interesting part of the prompt, which is the context. Even though you give a lot of instructions, you need to set the context of what you need. Okay, that's where you have to describe in detail about what you need. Okay, so that's where the context comes in. And the other aspect is your input data. If you have any kind of input data you want to pass it as a part of the prompt, you can also do that. The other optional parameter in this prompt component is the output format. For example, you can actually ask the output of a ChatGPT system to have a JSON response or a table response, and more importantly, you can also ask for a numbered list or a bullet point. Okay, so those are output format that you can actually use. So if you take all these four elements, and that's what a prompt actually is made of. That's the structure of the prompt. So for the technical writer, we are so fascinated and attached to this documentation development lifecycle, DDLC. And during this, excuse me, during this life cycle, the most important thing for a technical writer is we go sit with the subject matter experts and we ask some probing questions. We collect the knowledge and then we come and document, and then we do a lot of peer review process, and then we publish the content accordingly as per our own internal business or the workflow that we have. The important of prompt is you have to learn how to frame a question so that it helps you to find the right information from your subject matter experts. That's the crux of your probing mentality, and that's exactly where the prompt engineering shines. So let's look at the first kind of a tactic in prompt engineering. So the first tactic is clarity in instruction. So you got to be extremely specific about what you need, and you can also be a little bit elaborate about that specification. To give you a best example, instead of asking a question like, give me a list of influential technical writers, you can actually say, give me a 5 technical writers who are from the from USA. And here, if you look at the where I did the specification and detail is, look at the word 5. And that's actually, I'm specifying, I do not want a big list. I just need 5 of them. And if you look at the detail, even though there's a lot of technical writers around the globe, influential technical around the globe, I only want who are from the USA. Okay, very simple to use. So the first tactic that you have to follow is clarity in instruction. And here's another example. Instead of saying, hey, I want to have write an essay about knowledge management, you can clearly state, you can clearly put the prompt as, I want to write about knowledge management. Create an article outline on knowledge management with 2 headings and 3 subheadings for each heading. See how easy it is for you to actually understand the prompt, and ChatGPT also and the Bard also understands that in a very clear manner. So that's the, and here's a good example for if you're um, um, if you're having a cat. I love cats, and instead of asking what's the good name for a cat, I have a fluffy cat, so suggest some names for a fluffy cat. So that fluffy is where you specify, and since you said fluffy, ChatGPT, like a large language model, understands the whole context and then gives you the right kind of output that you need. Okay, let's see it in action in the showcase. So here's the one output prompt I have in terms of the writing an essay about knowledge management. And here you can actually see ChatGPT was extremely meticulous in giving the output, because I've actually given the instruction in a very specific manner. Okay. And let's move on to the second tactic. The second tactic is called show and tell. Here you give some examples, and ChatGPT try to mimic something very similar to what, based on the examples you have given. This technique in prompt engineering is called few shot prompting. So basically, you're giving some examples and asking ChatGPT like system to mimic that pattern. Okay. So let's look at these 2 examples in detail. Let's move on to, let me share my screen and then show. So here I have excuse me, a chat GPT like system, and let me try giving this. So here's the first prompt, very very vague in nature. See, it's trying to give a lot of influential technical writers around the globe. But having said that, if I say, give me 5 writers who are from the USA, right now you can actually say it's actually changed the output, and it's only giving me 5 who are from the USA. Okay, there you go. So this is pretty cool. And instead of saying what is the good name for a cat, here we go. It actually produces a big list and gives me 10. But if I say, give me suggest some names for a fluffy cat, the output is a little bit different. See, cotton, fluff. I love the word snowball. There you go. So it's very once you give the specific instruction, so ChatGPT is able to make a lot more tailored recommendations for you. So here's the other example. So let me give you this example where I asked them to give some kind of a example. So there you go. So I gave him some kind of an example where a cat looks like. So these cat animal names are named after Marvel comics. So I'm giving some examples in terms of like cat, and then I'm asking something for horse. So based on that, it actually telling you Thor, Thunder Roof, Silver Surfer Stallion. That's pretty cool what it can do. So it's called few shot prompting. So the third aspect I'm going to talk about is called personas. So this is a pretty cool kind of a technique where you can actually assign some persona to the your chat GPT and then ask this to give you something based on that persona. Here's an example. Here I'm asking if you want, if you can actually act as a call center assistant, and then you can actually create a email, okay, about some bad customer experience, and you can actually specify what kind of output you also need. Okay, so this is a lot more a tailored output you'll get from the using the prompt engineering technique. So this is tactic 3. To give you a best example, let's say you are reviewing some Pizza Hut place, and instead of asking a very broad-ended question in terms of write a review for a Pizza Hut, you can actually ask the chat GPT in terms of prompt, hey, you are a food critic, write a review of Pizza Hut. Now what actually happening inside the large language model, the moment you say food critic, it know what kind of vocabulary that a food critic would normally use in a text, and it use the right kind of vocabulary to create a review for the Pizza Hut. So it's very professionally done. And as a technical writer, we interact with a lot of customer support team a lot. So here's an example. You can actually say, hey, you are a customer success manager or a customer support agent, draft an email about some kind of a procedure you want, and you can actually specify, hey, write it in a very professional tone and write only six sentences, and it is able to do that very beautifully. And more importantly, the more explanation you give as part of the persona, it understands the holistic concept of what you need. Okay, then it is able to give a tailored output based on the prompt that you give. Here is an example of one of the prompt I've given in terms of a delayed response for a better service. Okay. And then the tactic, let's move on to the next tactic here. What you do is you specify the output format and its characteristics. Okay. Instead of saying, giving a piece of text and ask is to summarize the text, you can say, hey, summarize the text delimited in 3 quotes in 50 words. So that's 50 words is very specific. The reason why you put everything in triple quotes is that inside your sentences there might be double quotes and apostrophes. So it's basically you can delimit all your content within using some delimiter parameter. Okay, here is a bunch of examples I've actually given that you can actually use to specify the output format. Okay, here's an example where I've used the Apollo program in terms of moon landing, and I've given a piece of text and asked it to summarize in about 50 words, and ChatGPT did an amazing job. Let's move on to the next piece of element where I talked about a general kind of a form, an output. Here, you can output any kind of text into a table format. easy for a human being to synthesize the data. As a technical writer, we produce a lot of textual information. But having said that, sometimes the textual information might be a little bit redundant in nature. So for our audience simplicity, we always want to convert that piece of text into table, for which we need a lot of synthesis and stuff like that. But here is a little prompt that says generate the table containing this information. And if you look at the text, it's a little bit laborious to learn, tedious to learn and synthesize for a human being. But if you give the same in the prompt engineering, it actually creates a beautiful table, just like what you have seen. Okay, this is an amazing kind of a prompt you can actually use to convert a lot of content that you have and represent in a very structured and a beautiful format, just like the table is one of the examples. And same goes with the bullet points. You can actually ask ChatGPT to summarize some text in bullet points and things like that. Okay. So moving on to the tactic number 6, where this is a very interesting concept in prompt engineering. It is called iterative fine tuning. So you fine tune a prompt over a period of time. Okay, let me show you with an example what it is. So ask what is the distance between Berlin and Paris, and it's giving me the distance. Okay, now I go and say, hey, you know what, compare this with distance between Munich and Paris. So this is for assessment purpose. So it's also giving me a bit of what's the distance. But here's the magic. Here I go. You know what? Give me in one word. Okay, so it's interesting. Now it says further. Last time I checked, it says equal. Okay. So this is some kind of a where you can actually do the context. Remember, all these ChatGPT systems are conversational in nature, so it understands the previous context you type, and using this iterative fine tuning, you can actually ask the specific question and you can actually dwell deeper. Okay, very interested in terms of learning perspective as well. Okay, so you can actually use iterative fine tuning for learning any kind of system, any kind of concepts. Sorry, let me switch back to the PowerPoint. So here is that example, and here is the prompt that I used earlier. And then if you can see, right now it says the ChatGPT says equal, but in the demo I've shown you further. Let's talk about that, why there is a variation in terms of the output from ChatGPT. Okay, and that prompt is called hallucination, by the way. Okay, coming back to the tactic number seven. This is about code generation and debugging. As a technical writer, we will be given a piece of code either to include as part of the documentation, or as an indie developer, we might be using some open source tools for which we might need to generate some code for some of the tasks that we do. Okay, we can use ChatGPT to generate code. I'll give you a best example. Act as a junior Python programmer, write a code for Fibonacci series. Very simple for ChatGPT to actually do. Or we can have a little more complicated task. Let's say you are given a Python code and you're asked to debug. There you go. You throw the code into ChatGPT and you say, hey, debug this Python code. That's the prompt you actually use, and it actually debugs the code. Okay. And with the power of ChatGPT, I do not know Swift in terms of iOS building an app, and I was able to build a small app with the help of ChatGPT. Okay, it's amazing how you can actually use this piece of technology and include right set of prompts, and you get what you need, and then you can actually build a cool app. Okay, it's pretty amazing what it can do. Okay, and sometimes I also copy the code into my to my compiler, and then I might encounter some of the bugs as well. So I'll take the error and then I put it into ChatGPT. Hey, how do I troubleshoot this error? And then it actually gives me a bit of a troubleshooting guide as well. So there you go. It actually increases my productivity by 100-fold. Okay. And the other aspect is, as you know that as a technical writer, we are fond of one of the programming language, probably Python or .NET. If you want to convert that piece of code into another language, yep, this prompt engineering can actually help. So you can actually give a piece of code, and you can actually ask ChatGPT like system to convert a code into a different programming language like Java, .NET, or example. Let's come to the tactic number 8. So as a technical writer, we are close to finding typos and semantic errors. Again, ChatGPT can actually help you with those during those content creation process. Okay. So things like Grammarly also can help, but what I found with the ChatGPT like system is it's able to actually highlight the areas where I can actually improve. So Grammarly actually suggests, but if I want to see it to believe it, I usually use this prompt. Hey, highlight the typos and grammar mistakes in the text delimited by triple quotes. And then I give a bit of a content, and it's able to highlight, okay, the areas where there's a lot of typos and semantic errors. Instead of semantic errors, if you have a lot of sections where you have few paragraphs, you can actually find out whether the information flow is right, whether the content is actually cohesive, things like that, where it is very subjective in nature for a technical writer to judge, and where ChatGPT can actually improve your content a lot. So comes to the tactic number 9. This is my favorite part, and if you have seen in a lot of ChatGPT like system, even Bard, there's always a regenerate button in there, and if you don't like the response it actually gives, you can click that regenerate and it gives you another set of response. Here's another example. What is the another word for enhance? It actually gives you enhance. But if I click regenerate button again, it also trying to produce the same output. Okay. So you got to be a little bit careful with the regenerate button. The reason is, the moment you throw in a very specific question with the regenerate button, it can only knows the deterministic output. Okay, if you want a regenerate button to give you a little more variety of output, the question have to be a little bit broader. Okay, then it actually comes with a different set of variations. Even if you can change your prompt, instead of saying what is the another word for enhance, if you change your prompt saying what is the most widely used word for enhance, but it still sticks with improve. Okay, but sometimes it also gives you a different set of input. So there you go. So if you want to change the how a regenerate button gives you a different kind of options, you got to play around with your prompt. Okay, so that is something very important to know. That's tactic number 9. Okay, so look, this is pretty much the high level idea about the whole prompt engineering. Let me summarize in terms of where we started with all the tactics. So the first is the prompt have, so in terms of some giving a summary of all the 9 tactics we have talked about. The first important thing in prompt is you got to be very clear in terms of your instruction. That is the first and important thing. Clarity in instruction and giving us right kind of specification and detail would actually help. Okay, extremely important. The second aspect is you can fine tune over a period of time as well. The third technique in prompt engineering is more in terms of having a persona for your ChatGPT like system, and using that persona to create a right kind of content. Okay, and the other aspect we talked about is in terms of the output format and its characteristics, and also we have seen something on the code debugging as well. So these are the high level aspects of prompt engineering. Let's delve into the business use case. This is something very close to my heart, because as a technical writer, we not only produce content, we also look at from our customer lens in terms of how they actually consume our content. Okay, very important. Let's assume that you have some kind of a ChatGPT like system on top of your documentation platform. Okay, there's a lot of tools out there, and from document history we also have a generative AI solution called Eddy. Okay, let's look at some of the prompt engineering actually used to get most out of the documentation content that you actually produced. Okay, so if you have a documentation site and if you have some kind of a generative AI kind of a search system built on top, like a ChatGPT system built on top of your documentation system, let's look at the first use case where you can actually use the whole documentation content to build content for your LMS system, your learning management system. Here are a few of the prompts. So let's dive into action so that you can actually get to see. So here's the this is Document360 documentation site, and I have the bot. We have a generative AI solution called AD, and I'm in AD right now. So here is the prompt. So I'm actually using AD to create a list of questionnaire for my learning management system. So here my prompt is, I'm creating a learning management system for my organization. Create 5 multiple choice question, each with correct answer, focusing on AI feature. Okay, let's see what output it actually gives you. So it takes the prompt and it uses. Okay, that is interesting. Okay. Let me change the prompt to something different. So here I'm actually not asking it to set the question to hard. Probably the content is a little bit less in terms of for creating 5 multiple choice question. So here we go. So right now you can actually see that it actually uses AI powered tag recommender, uploading API specification file. Those are the questions that is actually able to create with a specific topic. Again, this feature or anything could be anything related to what you do in your organization. Okay, so that's one kind of a prompt you can actually use. Okay, um, here's another example. So here I'm actually asking some questions on yes or no type of questions. Okay, and here we go. It's trying to generate all those yes or no type of questions. Okay, this is pretty cool what it can actually do. Okay. So the second use case I want to give you is in terms of how we can actually use to create some kind of a for using your documentation platform for helping your customer support team. So here's the prompt. Here I'm saying write an email to a customer giving a list of steps to insert a business glossary. So that's my prompt, and you can actually see what it's trying to do is it's trying to collate all the information in terms of the how-to procedures, in terms of the steps to insert the business glossary. But just remember, I'm asking you to write an email, so it will actually create this whole instruction in terms of an email. Okay. Having said that, you can also set a persona in the start. You can actually state that you are a customer support agent. Write an email to a customer, and you can close the prompt. Let's wait for it to finish. Maybe the content is not there. Okay, let me try in my old workspace. So there you go. So it's, if you look at it, you just have to click copy and then copy this content. Now you don't, there's no need for a customer support agent to do a search on a particular keyword, go to the amazing article that you have written and then copy and then reformat it and then put it in the into the customer support system. All you got to do is click on the copy button. There is an email that's already drafted for you in a perfectly amazing language. And remember, I've talked about the output characteristics. You can ask the AD to have a persona, and you can actually have this email written in a very professional or professional tone as well, that adheres to some of the brand guidelines set. Okay, this is pretty cool what you can do. The next business case I want to show you is in terms of you can actually use these kind of systems to compare and then have something in a table format. I think we talked about in the prompt engineering. Right now I'm asking AD to compare Freshdesk and Zendesk integration and then give it in a kind of a table format. Again, if you go back to that prompt engineering technique we have used, so same thing applies here, and it's able to put that in a very table format in this manner. It's pretty cool what it can do. Okay. So there you go. So it bucketed the list in terms of integration, sorry, installation, share, create article, and those aspects. Okay, this is pretty cool what it can do. So here's another example. I'm trying to ask Eddie to compare um, Markdown and HTML in a table format. Again, very simple prompt engineering technique, and it's able to do that very effectively. The most important thing you have to remember as a technical writer is I don't think you would have created this table formatting your content. But remember, now with the prompt engineering, your customers have freedom and control over what kind of information they need, and more importantly, the preference they have. So the choice is with your customers. Even if you do not produce this output, written this content in, written this uh, comparison inside your documentation, chat GPT like system, for example Eddie in this case, is able to compare and then bring that visually appealing kind of content to your end customers. So this is pretty cool what it can do. The other aspect, the business case, is with the chat GPT like system, you can do translation, language translation on the fly. Okay, here's an example. So here I'm actually asked Eddie in Spanish language, what is the size of the favicon? Okay, here it's in French, I believe, and it is able to do the translation in French as well. Remember, I do not have the underlying content in French language. Here's another example of something given in French, and the underlying content is in English, and is able to give you that output in German language. Okay. So that's the language translation on the fly. It's pretty cool what it can do. Let's say you have a long article and you want to summarize it. Instead of creating your own summary and putting it, maybe you can actually ask this chat GPT like system. For example, ask Eddie. You can actually say, hey, summarize all the document 360 integrations with collaboration tool. And what it actually trying to do is it takes all the article that you have written on collaboration tools and is able to summarize. So here is a beautiful prompt to summarize everything. The other aspect is you can also remember in the prompt engineering we also talked about the outputs in different format. So here's another example of again the bullet points. We talked about table format, JSON format, and stuff like that. Here I'm actually asking it to give it in bullet points and the summary of it. Okay. Here is another one. You can also use it to create JSON output as well. And you can actually specify how the key value pair will give, and you can actually use the few shot prompting technique in terms of showing Eddie some examples, and Eddie can actually replicate the same JSON format. It's pretty cool what it can actually do. So now we switch back to the presentation. The other business case we have seen is as a technical writer, we sit on a lot of Teams meetings and Zoom meetings, and there's a lot of conversation happens around the Slack. Basically, if you can take the transcripts and then send it to ChatGPT like system and ask it to provide a summary of discussion, or give the whole transcript and ask us to find what is the purpose of building a certain feature or an element in your service, and things like that. Or even the prompt could be around, hey, based on this transcript, find out what are the limitation of a feature in your based on the conversation that you have, and a chat GPT like system is able to summarize that for you. Okay. It's very focused on the best use case. To give you a summary in terms of some of the business use cases that you talked about, the first business case we talked about is in terms of using a prompt engineering for building a learning management system based on your documentation content. The second use case we talked about is using right kind of prompts to help your customer support agents to generate an email response based on the documentation content you have. And the third use case we talked about is in terms of comparing the formats in different kind of formats, comparing different things in different formats. Okay, and we also seen some business use cases where you can also do language translation on the fly using the ChatGPT like system. Okay, using simple prompt engineering technique. And we also looked at some of the use cases for summarizing, shortening, and expanding, and even you can actually use ChatGPT like prompts to create article outlines. All right. Well, so there are some limitations in terms of using this ChatGPT or Bard or any kind of large language model based systems in place. The first is most of these systems are trained on data, the corpus of data that's available on the internet. For example, in ChatGPT 4, it's limited to April 2023. Okay, that's the limitation of the system. So you got to be extremely mindful when you ask for any kind of current information it might not provide. Okay, extremely important for us to actually know. The other problem is ChatGPT 4, as I seen in the example, where we try to compare the distance between Berlin and Paris and with Munich and Paris. In the live demo you have seen it is further, but in the screenshot I have taken, it actually shows it's equal. So which means sometimes it actually hallucinates. Okay, here's a best example. I've actually asked ChatGPT 4. In fact, you can actually try it. I ask it to act like a movie critic and ask a movie review for the Kung Fu Panda 5. By the way, Kung Fu Panda 5 is never released. Okay, but if you look at the way it is actually generating, so it's actually doing a lot of hallucination. Okay, it's making up a lot of fictional stuff. So that is something you need to be aware of when you use these kind of system. Given that there is a lot of buzz about ChatGPT and Bard, there are other systems in place where you can actually try out. The one is called Perplexity, and the other one is Claude.ai, that's from Anthropic. So those are other kind of providers you can actually use. And here's an important thing. I'm fascinated by whether these prompts are technology agnostic, whether they are portable from one system to another. In a lot of the systems we have tested, and they are portable in nature. But again, in some cases, we also found out that some of the prompts might not work in other providers' ChatGPT-like system. The reason being they're trained on a different set of text corpus, so sometimes it might not provide a right set of output that you intend. So which means when you change your ChatGPT-like system provider, you might, as a technical writer, you also need to fine-tune the prompt to suit what you need. Okay, so it's extremely important to note as well. Okay, with that, thanks so much for being with us.
Yep. Thank you, Silva. The session was really informative, and I hope every attendees enjoyed it as much as I did.
Thank you so much for joining our session. We look forward to upcoming webinars as well. Stay tuned. Thank you so much.